At my father's funeral, a woman gave me a baby and whispered, "He's yours now." I never thought my father's funeral would be the day my entire life shattered into pieces I couldn't recognize anymore. But that's exactly what happened when a stranger placed a baby in my arms and whispered words that would haunt me forever. "He's yours now." My name is Diana, I'm 52 years old, and I thought I knew everything about my family. I was wrong. This is my story, a funeral story that turned into the most shocking revelation of my life, exposing dramatic secrets I never saw coming. The morning of the funeral was gray and cold, matching the emptiness in my chest. My father had been my rock, my confidant, the man who taught me strength when the world tried to break me down. Losing him felt like losing a part of myself. I stood in my black dress, staring at my reflection, trying to hold myself together for what was coming. The church was packed. Dad had been loved by so many people, colleagues, neighbors, old friends from his military days. I sat in the front pew with my two brothers, Marcus and James, and my husband, Robert. My mother had passed 10 years earlier, so it was just us now. Or so I thought. The service was beautiful but brutal. Every word the pastor spoke about my father's integrity, his devotion to family, his unwavering character, it all felt like a knife twisting deeper into my grief. I tried to focus on the memories, the good times, the lessons he taught me about standing tall even when life knocked you down. Then came the moment that changed everything. This dramatic storytelling begins right there, at the worst possible time. As we stood to view the casket one final time, I noticed her. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, standing at the back of the church. She was pale, thin, wearing an oversized coat that seemed to swallow her small frame. She was holding something close to her chest. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something there, desperation, fear, and something else I couldn't name. I turned back to say my final goodbye to Dad, my hand trembling as I touched the cold wood of his casket. "I love you, Daddy," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'll miss you every single day." That's when I felt her presence behind me. The young woman had moved through the crowd with startling speed. Before I could process what was happening, she pressed something warm and solid into my arms. A baby. She had handed me a baby. "He's yours now," she whispered urgently, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm so sorry. The letter explains everything. Please. I'm begging you." I stood frozen, this tiny infant suddenly in my arms, making soft cooing sounds against my chest. The church fell silent. Everyone was staring. My brothers rushed toward us, but the woman was already running, practically sprinting toward the exit before anyone could stop her. "Wait!" I called out, but she was gone. Vanished into the morning mist like a ghost, leaving me holding a baby I'd never seen before in my life. This mystery story was just beginning, and I didn't even know it yet. The baby squirmed in my arms, his tiny fist grasping at my dress. He had the most beautiful brown eyes, wide and innocent, completely unaware of the chaos his arrival had caused. He couldn't have been more than 3 months old. "Diana, what the hell is going on?" Marcus grabbed my arm, his voice sharp with confusion and anger. "Who was that woman? Whose baby is that?" "I don't know," I stammered, my mind racing 1,000 miles a second. She gave him to me and ran. She said there's a letter." Robert was suddenly at my side, his face a mixture of concern and suspicion. "A letter? Where?" I looked down and saw it then, a white envelope tucked into the baby's blue blanket, my name written across it in shaky handwriting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the child and retrieve the envelope at the same time. The pastor approached cautiously, his elderly face creased with worry. "Perhaps we should move this somewhere private? The congregation is." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "No, I need to know what this is. Right now." James took the baby from my arms, awkwardly, like he'd never held an infant before, while I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded multiple times, the edges worn like it had been opened and refolded many times before. What I read in the next 60 seconds destroyed everything I thought I knew about my father, my family, and my entire childhood. This shocking letter contained a truth so devastating, so impossible, that my knees actually buckled. Robert caught me before I hit the ground. "Diana. What does it say?" I couldn't speak. The words on that paper had stolen my voice, my breath, my sense of reality. I handed the letter to Robert with shaking hands and watched his face transform from concern to absolute shock as he read. The letter was from the woman who'd run away. Her name was Sarah. And the baby, this beautiful, innocent baby currently fidgeting in my brother's uncomfortable grip, was my father's son. My half-brother. Born just 3 months ago to a woman Dad had been seeing for over 5 years. 5 years. An entire secret life. A whole relationship I knew nothing about. This family betrayal cut deeper than any pain I'd ever known. But there was more. Sarah wrote that she was dying. Stage 4 cancer, too aggressive to treat, too far gone to fight. She had no family, no one to care for the baby when she was gone. And Dad, he had promised her he would tell us, that he would make arrangements, that this child would be taken care of. But he died first. Heart attack, sudden and brutal, 2 weeks before he could make things right. And now Sarah, with weeks or maybe days left to live, had done the only thing she could think of. She brought the baby to the one person she thought might have her father's kindness and strength. Me. She knew about me, I whispered, my voice hollow. She knew who I was. He told her about me. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. While I had been calling Dad every Sunday, having him over for dinner, laughing at his jokes and cherishing our relationship, he had another life. Another love. Another child. Marcus snatched the letter from Robert's hands, his eyes scanning the page with increasing fury. This is insane. This has to be fake. Dad would never. There's a DNA test mentioned, Robert interrupted quietly, pointing to a line in the letter. She says there are documents in the envelope. She had them done when the baby was born. I felt like I was drowning. The church walls seemed to be closing in, the faces of all those people, Dad's friends, his colleagues, people who thought they knew him, all staring at us with shock and pity and judgment. This emotional drama was playing out in front of everyone, and I had no way to stop it. James looked down at the baby in his arms, and I saw something flicker across his face. Disgust. Anger. Resentment. We need to call child services. Right now. This isn't our responsibility. He's our brother, I heard myself say, though the words felt foreign in my mouth. He's a stranger, Marcus shot back, his voice rising. He's the product of Dad's affair, his betrayal of Mom's memory. You want to take care of the evidence of his cheating? People were starting to whisper, their voices creating a low buzz of gossip and speculation that made my skin crawl. The pastor tried to shepherd us toward a private room, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at that baby and wonder how my father, the man I admired most in the world, could have kept this secret revealed only in death. The baby started crying then, a high-pitched wail that seemed to cut through all the noise and confusion. Instinct took over. I took him back from James, cradling him against my chest, bouncing him gently the way I'd done with my own children years ago. He quieted almost immediately, his tiny hand grasping my finger with surprising strength. And in that moment, looking down at his face, a face that had my father's nose, my father's chin, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a secret or a scandal or a problem to be solved. This was a child. An innocent baby who had done nothing wrong except be born into an impossible situation. We need to leave, Robert said firmly, placing his hand on my lower back. Diana, we need to get you home. We can figure this out there, away from all these people. I nodded numbly, unable to form words. My brothers followed us out of the church, their faces dark with anger and confusion. Behind us, I could hear the explosion of whispered conversations, the funeral story becoming the most scandalous piece of gossip this town had seen in years. The drive home was silent except for the baby's occasional whimpers. Robert kept glancing at me, his jaw tight, clearly wanting to say something but holding back. Marcus and James followed in their own car, probably already planning how to handle this shocking truth that had just demolished our family's image. When we got to my house, I laid the baby on the couch, surrounding him with pillows so he wouldn't roll off. He looked up at me with those wide, innocent eyes, completely unaware that his very existence was tearing a family apart. I sat on the floor next to the couch, my back against the coffee table, and finally let myself break. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside, a place I didn't even know existed. I cried for my father, for the man I thought he was and the truth of who he actually was. I cried for my mother, grateful she never knew about this betrayal. I cried for this baby, born into such impossible circumstances. And I cried for myself, for the daughter who had to discover her father's secret life at his funeral. Robert sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "We'll figure this out," he murmured, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. This wasn't a problem with an easy solution. This was life-changing, family-destroying, complicated. My brothers arrived 20 minutes later, and the argument that followed was brutal. Marcus wanted to call child services immediately, insisting this wasn't our responsibility. James was quieter but equally adamant that we couldn't just take in Dad's illegitimate child like it was normal. "Think about what this means," Marcus paced the living room like a caged animal. "Everyone will know. Everyone will find out that Dad was a cheater, that he had a whole secret life. Is that what you want? To destroy his memory? To humiliate us?" "He destroyed his own memory," I said quietly, my voice hoarse from crying. "He did this. Not us. Not this baby." "Exactly," James chimed in. "The baby isn't our problem. There are systems for this, Diana. Foster care. Adoption agencies. People who are trained to handle situations like this." "Situations like this?" I stood up, anger finally cutting through my grief. "He's not a situation. He's a 3-month-old baby whose mother is dying and whose father is dead. He's alone in the world except for us." "Except for you, you mean," Marcus said, his eyes hard. "Because James and I want nothing to do with this. If you decide to take him in, you're on your own. We won't help you. We won't pretend he's family. We won't let Dad's mistake become our burden." The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. My brothers, men I'd known my entire life, men I'd played with as children, fought with as teenagers, supported as adults, were willing to abandon a helpless infant because of wounded pride and fear of judgment. "Get out," I said softly. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house." My voice was stronger now, steady with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. "If that's how you feel, if you can look at this baby and see nothing but a mistake to be erased, then I don't want you here." James opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "Leave. Now." They left, slamming the door behind them with enough force to make the baby startle and whimper. Robert immediately went to him, picking him up with the careful awkwardness of someone who hadn't held an infant in 2 decades. "Diana," he said carefully, "I need you to think about what you're saying. If you take this child, it changes everything. Our life, our retirement plans, our peace and quiet. We raised our kids. We're supposed to be done with diapers and midnight feedings and—" "I know," I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know what it means." "Do you?" He looked at me seriously, the baby cradled in his arms creating a jarring image. "Because I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I want to do this. And I need you to understand that if you make this choice, you might be making it alone." The words hit me like a slap. My husband, my partner of 28 years, was telling me he might leave if I chose to save this child. The dramatic confession of everyone's true feelings was more painful than any funeral could ever be. I looked at the baby, then at Robert, then back at the baby. This unexpected twist in my life was forcing me to choose between the family I had and the family I could become. And I had no idea what the right answer was. Night fell, and Robert retreated to the guest bedroom without another word. I was left alone in the living room with a baby I didn't know how to care for, a letter from a dying woman, and a heart so shattered I wasn't sure it would ever heal. I read Sarah's letter again, slowly this time, looking for answers in the words she'd left behind. She wrote about meeting my father at a community center where she volunteered. She was 23, working 2 jobs, trying to finish her nursing degree. He was 68, recently retired, volunteering to teach woodworking to teenagers. She wrote about how their friendship developed slowly, how he made her laugh, how he understood her dreams and fears in a way no one else ever had. She knew he was older. She knew people would judge. But she loved him, and he loved her. Or so she said. She wrote about the pregnancy, the shock and fear, and my father's initial panic. But then his acceptance, his joy at becoming a father again. His promise that he would tell his family, that he would make this right. His death 2 weeks later, leaving all his promises unfulfilled. And then the cancer diagnosis, coming just 1 month after burying the man she loved. Stage 4, inoperable, terminal. Weeks to live, maybe a month if she was lucky. No family, no support system, no one to care for her infant son when she was gone. So she made a desperate choice. She came to the funeral, found me, and placed her dying wish literally in my arms. This heartbreaking story was real, and I was now living inside it. I looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully in the portable crib I'd found in the attic, left over from grandchildren's visits. He was beautiful. Perfect. Innocent. And he was my father's son, which made him my brother, even if my brain couldn't quite process that reality yet. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter, Vanessa. She lived 3 states away with her own family, but news of the funeral incident had already reached her through the family gossip chain. Mom, is it true? Is there really a baby? Are you okay? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, it's true. I'm not okay. But I will be. She called immediately. I stepped onto the porch to take it, not wanting to wake the baby. The night air was cold and sharp, making me shiver in my thin sweater. Mom, what are you going to do? Vanessa's voice was thick with concern and confusion. I don't know yet, baby. I truly don't know. Uncle Marcus is telling everyone you've lost your mind, that you're going to destroy Dad's reputation and ruin the family by keeping that baby. I laughed bitterly. Dad destroyed his own reputation. I'm just dealing with the aftermath. But Mom, she paused, and I could hear her struggling with what to say. Is it true? Was Grandpa really having an affair? For years? According to the letter, yes. 5 years. With a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Vanessa was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, I don't know how to feel about that. Part of me wants to defend him, to say there must be an explanation. But another part of me is just angry. At him. For lying. For cheating on Grandma's memory. For putting you in this position. I'm angry too, I admitted, tears streaming down my face again. I'm so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. But I'm also heartbroken and confused and terrified because there's a baby in my living room, and his mother is dying, and I have to decide what to do. What does Robert say? I swallowed hard. He says if I keep the baby, I might be doing it alone. Vanessa gasped. He wouldn't leave you. Not after almost 30 years. I don't know what he'll do. Everyone's showing me who they really are right now, and I don't like what I'm seeing. We talked for another hour, my daughter offering support and love even as she struggled with her own feelings about her grandfather's shocking betrayal. When we finally hung up, I felt fractionally less alone, but no closer to knowing what to do. I went back inside to find Robert standing in the living room, staring down at the sleeping baby with an unreadable expression. His name is Daniel, I said softly. It's in the letter. Sarah named him Daniel. Robert didn't respond for a long moment. Then, he looks like him. Like your dad. Around the eyes. I know. This is insane, Diana. All of it. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and none of this will be real. Me too. He turned to face me, and I saw the exhaustion in his features, the weight of this impossible situation pressing down on him. I can't tell you what to do. But I need you to understand what you'd be taking on. A newborn, at our age. The judgment from everyone we know. The financial burden. The complete disruption of every plan we had for our retirement. And for what? For a man who lied to you your entire life? Who betrayed your mother and deceived his whole family? For a baby who didn't ask to be born into this mess, I countered. For a child who is innocent of his father's sins. For my brother, Robert. Blood doesn't stop mattering just because the circumstances are complicated. Blood, he repeated, shaking his head. You didn't even know he existed until today. How can you call him your brother? How can I not? He's my father's son. That makes him my family, whether I like it or not. Robert sighed deeply, running his hands through his graying hair. I'm going to bed. We'll talk more in the morning when we've both had time to process. He left me alone again, and I settled into the rocking chair my grandmother had left me, watching Daniel sleep and trying to imagine what my life would look like if I chose to keep him. The next morning brought new challenges. Daniel woke up crying at 4 a.m., hungry and wet. I fumbled through changing a diaper for the first time in 20 years, grateful that some instincts apparently never fade. I fed him with the formula and bottles that had mysteriously appeared on my porch during the night, likely from Vanessa, who must have ordered them online and arranged emergency delivery. As dawn broke, I sat with Daniel in my arms, both of us exhausted, and I thought about my father. Really thought about him, trying to reconcile the man I knew with the man who could keep such enormous secrets. He had been a good father to me. Loving, present, supportive. He'd encouraged my education, walked me down the aisle, been there for every important moment of my life. Could all of that be erased by this revelation? Did one secret, however massive, negate a lifetime of love? I didn't have answers. All I had were more questions and a baby who needed care regardless of my emotional turmoil. Robert emerged from the guest room around 8, looking as exhausted as I felt. He made coffee without speaking, then sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes on Daniel rather than me. I called the hospital last night, he finally said. After you fell asleep. I wanted to know if the story was true, if there really was a Sarah who matched the description and circumstances. My heart stopped. And? There is. Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, admitted to hospice care 3 days ago. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They confirmed she has an infant son but couldn't tell me more due to privacy laws. But Diana, she's not expected to make it through the week. The reality of it hit me fresh. This woman, this young woman who had loved my father and borne his child, was dying right now. Alone in a hospital. Knowing she'd given away her baby, not knowing if her desperate gamble had worked, if I would actually care for her son. I want to see her, I said suddenly. Robert's eyebrows shot up. What? I need to see her. To talk to her. To understand. I looked down at Daniel, sleeping peacefully after his morning feeding. She trusted me with her child. The least I can do is look her in the eye. Diana, I don't think that's a good idea. What would you even say to her? I don't know. But I have to try. 2 hours later, I walked into hospice care with Daniel in my arms, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This mystery story was about to give me answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The nurse at the desk looked surprised when I explained who I was looking for. Are you family? I hesitated, then looked down at the baby. In a way, yes. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Room 247. But please, she's very weak. Keep your visit short. The walk down that hallway felt like walking to my own execution. Every step brought me closer to the woman who had shared my father's bed, his secrets, his final years. The woman who had given birth to my brother. The dying stranger who had changed my life forever. I knocked softly on the door of room 247. A weak voice called out, "Come in." Sarah Mitchell was small and frail in the hospital bed, her dark skin pale with illness, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf. But her eyes were sharp and alert, and they widened with recognition when she saw me standing in the doorway with Daniel. "You came," she whispered, tears immediately spilling down her cheeks. "You actually came. And you brought him." I stepped into the room, my legs shaking. I needed to understand. I needed to hear it from you. She nodded, struggling to sit up slightly. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For how I told you, for the timing, for all of it. But I was running out of time and options, and her voice broke. I couldn't let my baby go to strangers. Your father promised me you would understand. He said you had his heart, his strength." "My father lied to me for 5 years," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "Why should I believe anything he said about me?" Sarah flinched but didn't look away. "Because even though he kept our relationship secret, he never lied about who you were. He talked about you constantly. Diana, who became a lawyer despite everyone saying she couldn't. Diana, who raised 2 incredible kids. Diana, who had his stubborn streak and his sense of justice." She smiled weakly. "He loved you so much. His first child, his daughter who made him proud every single day of her life." The words hurt more than they comforted. "If he loved me so much, why didn't he tell me about you? About Daniel?" "Fear," she said simply. "Fear of disappointing you. Fear of destroying the image you had of him. Fear of dividing the family." She coughed, a wet, painful sound that made me wince. "He was going to tell you. After Daniel was born, he promised me he would sit you down and explain everything. He was just waiting for the right moment, the right words. But he died first." "He died first," she echoed, fresh tears flowing. "And then I got my diagnosis, and I realized Daniel would be completely alone. No father, no mother, no family. So I made a choice. A desperate, probably terrible choice. But it was the only one I had." I looked down at Daniel, sleeping peacefully against my chest. "Why me? Why not Marcus or James?" Sarah's laugh was bitter and painful. "Your father told me about your brothers. Good men," he said, "but rigid. Traditional. They would see Daniel as a problem to be solved, not a child to be loved. But you were different. Compassionate. Strong enough to do what's right even when it's hard." "You don't know me," I protested. "You're trusting your dying wish to a stranger based on stories from a man who kept you secret." "I know," she whispered. "But what choice did I have? I'm 28 years old, and I'm dying. My parents died in a car accident when I was 19. I have no siblings, no close friends, no one who could take a baby. It was you or the system, and I couldn't." She broke down completely. "I couldn't let my son become just another file in the system." I stood there, holding her child, watching her cry, and felt my anger begin to crack. This wasn't some homewrecker or villain from a soap opera. This was a terrified young woman who had loved my father and was now dying, desperate to ensure her child had a chance at life. "Tell me about him," I said quietly, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "Tell me about my father and your relationship. I need to understand." What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. Sarah told me everything, how they'd met, how their friendship had evolved into something more, how my father had struggled with guilt but couldn't stay away from her. She told me about quiet dinners at her tiny apartment, about trips they took under the guise of his woodworking conferences, about the joy on his face when she told him she was pregnant. She told me things about my father I'd never known, his fear of getting old, his loneliness after my mother died, his regret over mistakes he'd made earlier in life. She painted a picture of a complex man who had made questionable choices but who had genuinely loved her and their son. He was going to buy a house, she said, her voice fading as exhaustion took over. He had it all planned out. A place where all of us could be together, you, your brothers, me, Daniel. He wanted to blend the families, to make it work somehow. He thought he had time. But he didn't. No. He didn't. And now I don't either. She reached out a trembling hand toward Daniel. I moved closer, letting her touch her son's face one more time. Please, she whispered, her eyes locked on mine. Please don't let him be alone. Please give him the chance at life that I can't. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes. Maybe it was the weight of Daniel in my arms, so warm and alive and trusting. Maybe it was the memory of my father's voice telling me that family was the most important thing in the world. I'll take care of him, I heard myself say. I promise. I'll raise him and love him and make sure he knows who you were and how much you loved him. Sarah's face crumpled with relief and grief. Thank you. Thank you. You don't know what this means. You've given me the only peace I'll have before I die. We talked for another hour until she was too exhausted to continue. I promised to bring Daniel back to visit, though we both knew she didn't have much time left. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Diana? Your father was right about you. You do have his heart. Thank you for proving it. I left that room with tears streaming down my face and Daniel clutched tight to my chest. The nurse told me Sarah had maybe 3 or 4 days left. I promised to return the next day. Sarah Mitchell died 2 days later, at 3:47 in the morning, with only a hospice nurse by her side. I hadn't made it back in time. When I got the call, I sat in my kitchen and wept, for her, for my father, for Daniel, for the massive weight of responsibility I'd just taken on. The funeral arrangements fell to me since Sarah had no other family. It was small, simple, just a handful of people from the community center where she'd volunteered. I stood at her graveside with Daniel in my arms and promised her spirit that I would keep my word. The weeks that followed were brutal. My brothers refused to speak to me. Half my extended family sided with them, viewing my decision to keep Daniel as a betrayal of my father's memory and an embrace of his mistake. The other half were quietly supportive but kept their distance, unwilling to publicly take a stance. Robert moved into the guest room permanently. We existed in the same house like polite strangers, our marriage cracking under the pressure of my choice. He wasn't cruel or dismissive, he helped with Daniel when I was completely overwhelmed, but the warmth, the partnership we'd built over decades, was gone. My daughter Vanessa flew in to help, becoming my lifeline during those early weeks. She fell in love with Daniel immediately, which gave me hope that not everyone would see him as a shameful secret to be hidden. Mom, she said one night as we sat together while Daniel slept, I know this is hard. But I'm proud of you. You're doing the right thing, even though everyone's making it as difficult as possible. Am I? I asked, exhausted and doubting everything. Or am I destroying my marriage and my family for a man who lied to me? You're saving a baby who would otherwise be alone in the world. That's not about Dad or his lies. It's about who you are as a person. Her words helped, but they couldn't erase the loneliness or the constant second-guessing. Every midnight feeding, every diaper change, every moment of exhaustion made me wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then Daniel would look up at me with those eyes, my father's eyes, and smile his gummy baby smile, and something in my chest would squeeze tight with a feeling I couldn't quite name. Love? Duty? Hope? Maybe all three. 3 months after the funeral, I sat in a lawyer's office beginning the formal adoption process. My brothers had contested it, arguing that as blood relatives they had more right to make decisions about Daniel's future. The irony wasn't lost on me, they wanted nothing to do with raising him, but they wanted to control whether I could. The legal battle was draining and expensive, but I had one advantage: Sarah's letter and the documentation she'd left behind explicitly naming me as her choice for Daniel's guardian. Combined with my brother's stated refusal to take him in, the judge ruled in my favor. On a cold February morning, 6 months after that shocking funeral, I officially became Daniel's legal guardian and adoptive mother. Robert didn't attend the hearing. Neither did my brothers. But Vanessa was there, and a few close friends who had stood by me through everything, and that was enough. That night, I sat in the nursery I'd created in what used to be my home office, holding Daniel as he drifted off to sleep. He was 9 months old now, starting to sit up on his own, babbling constantly, reaching for everything with chubby, curious hands. "Your mama loved you so much," I whispered to him. "Sarah. She fought so hard to make sure you'd be okay. And your father, my father, he loved you too, even though he didn't get enough time with you. You come from love, Daniel. Complicated, messy, imperfect love, but love nonetheless." He yawned and snuggled closer, completely trusting, completely innocent of all the drama and pain his existence had caused. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Was my marriage damaged, perhaps beyond repair? Yes. Had I lost relationships with family members I'd known my entire life? Yes. Was every day exhausting, challenging, and sometimes overwhelming? Absolutely yes. But was this baby, this beautiful, innocent child, worth it? Was giving him a home and a family and a chance at life worth all the sacrifice? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Robert and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding on a Sunday evening in March. Daniel was down for the night, and the house was quiet for the first time in days. We sat across from each other at the dining table, two people who'd built a life together now sitting in the ruins of what we'd once had. "I think we should separate," he said quietly. "Not because I don't love you. But because I can't do this, Diana. I can't raise another child at 63 years old. I can't pretend everything is fine when it's not. And I can't watch you sacrifice everything for a choice I don't agree with." I'd known it was coming, but the words still hurt. 28 years, reduced to this, a quiet ending on a Sunday night because we wanted different things. "I understand," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I knew this might happen when I chose to keep Daniel. Do you regret it?" I thought about his question seriously before answering. "No. I regret the circumstances. I regret that my father put us all in this position. I regret that keeping Daniel meant losing you. But I don't regret Daniel himself. He's innocent in all this, and he deserves a family. I couldn't abandon him, even if it cost me everything else." Robert nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. "That's what I admire about you and what I can't live with anymore. Your absolute conviction about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time." We cried together that night, mourning the end of our marriage and the life we'd planned. But we also made peace with our different choices. Robert moved out 2 weeks later. Our divorce was finalized 6 months after that, civil and sad but not bitter. The months that followed were the loneliest of my life, but also somehow the most meaningful. I was a 53-year-old single mother of a 1-year-old, which felt absurd every time I said it out loud. But Daniel and I found our rhythm. We built our own little family of 2, and slowly, that was enough. Tentar novamente. K. Continuer. Editar. Vanessa visited every few months, bringing her own children to meet their uncle who was somehow younger than they were. My son, Marcus Jr., eventually came around too, though it took him over a year to accept Daniel as part of the family. He showed up at my door one Saturday morning with a bag of toys and an apology. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me, watching Daniel play with blocks on the living room floor. "About blood matching. About family. And I realized I was doing to Daniel exactly what people did to you when you were growing up, judging him for circumstances he couldn't control. I'd told my children stories about being a young black woman in the 70s and 80s, facing discrimination and low expectations, fighting for every opportunity. Somehow, I'd raised a son who understood the parallel, even if it had taken him time to see it. "Thank you for coming," I said, hugging him tight. "It means everything." My brothers, Marcus and James, never came around. We existed in an awkward family limbo, not quite estranged, but not really connected either. They sent Christmas cards. They acknowledged Daniel's existence in the most minimal way possible. But they made it clear that as far as they were concerned, I'd chosen a stranger over family loyalty. I tried not to let their rejection poison my days. Some relationships, I learned, couldn't survive the weight of uncomfortable truths. My father's secret life had exposed fault lines in our family that had probably always existed, we'd just never been forced to look at them before. Work became both a refuge and a challenge. I was a partner at a small law firm, and while my colleagues were professionally supportive, I could feel the shift in how they saw me. The whispers behind closed doors. The carefully neutral expressions when Daniel's daycare called during a meeting. The subtle suggestions that maybe I should consider taking it easy or reducing my caseload. I refused. I'd spent my entire career proving I belonged in rooms that didn't want me there. I wasn't about to let single motherhood at 53 become another excuse for people to doubt my competence. My assistant, Jennifer, became an unexpected ally. She was 29, recently married, and had no children of her own. But she started keeping emergency supplies in her desk, diapers, wipes, a change of clothes for Daniel, for the times when daycare called and I couldn't immediately leave. My mom was a single parent, she told me once, reorganizing her desk drawer to fit in another pack of diapers. I remember how hard she worked, how people judged her, how exhausted she always was. If I can make your life even a little easier, I want to. Those small kindnesses kept me going during the hardest months. A neighbor who volunteered to babysit so I could grocery shop alone. A former colleague who connected me with a support group for older adoptive parents. My hairdresser who squeezed me in during early morning appointments because she knew nap time was sacred. I learned that community doesn't always look like blood family. Sometimes it's the people who show up, who see you struggling and choose to help anyway. These strangers and acquaintances became my village, the support system my brothers should have been but chose not to be. Daniel's first birthday arrived, and I threw him a party that my younger self would have found ridiculous. Balloons, a cake shaped like a teddy bear, a house full of people who'd supported us through that brutal first year. Robert came, which surprised me. We were divorced by then, officially separated, but he still cared about Daniel in his own way. He's gotten big, Robert said, watching Daniel destroy his birthday cake with enthusiastic hands. Happy. He is, I agreed. We both are, actually. It's hard, but we're making it work. I'm glad. He turned to look at me, his expression complicated. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I couldn't do it with you, but I respect that you could. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was closure. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. As Daniel grew, I saw more of my father in him, not just physical resemblances, but mannerisms, expressions, quirks. The way he studied things intently before touching them. His booming laugh that seemed too big for his small body. His stubborn insistence on doing things himself, even when he clearly needed help. Each similarity was a small knife wound, reminding me of what I'd lost and what my father had thrown away with his secrets. But they were also gifts, glimpses of the man I'd loved, living on in this unexpected way. I talked to Daniel about his parents from the beginning, determined not to create more secrets and lies. I showed him pictures of Sarah that I'd recovered from her apartment, told him stories about her kindness and her dreams. I talked about my father, his grandfather and father both, with honesty about his strengths and his mistakes. Your first daddy loved you, I'd tell him at bedtime. He made mistakes, kept secrets he shouldn't have kept. But he loved you. And your first mommy loved you so much she made sure you'd have a family even when she couldn't be here. They both loved you, and now I love you too. He was too young to understand the complexity, but I believed the honesty would matter later. I refused to build his childhood on the same foundation of secrets and lies that had destroyed mine. The second year was easier than the first in some ways, harder in others. Daniel became mobile, which meant constant vigilance. He started daycare, which meant constant illnesses that we passed back and forth like unwanted gifts. He developed a personality, strong-willed, curious, affectionate, stubborn as hell. I turned 54, then 55. My body reminded me constantly that I was raising a toddler at an age when most of my peers were becoming grandparents. My back ached. My energy flagged. My patience was tested in ways it hadn't been since my own children were young. But I also found unexpected joy in the small things. Daniel's first words. His first steps. The way he'd run to me when I picked him up from daycare, shouting, "Mama," with pure delight. The way he'd curl up in my lap for stories, his small body warm and trusting against mine. These moments didn't erase the pain of everything I'd lost, but they created something new, a different kind of family, built on choice and love rather than biology and obligation. One afternoon, about 18 months after that infamous funeral, I was at the playground with Daniel when a woman approached me. She was about my age, well-dressed, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you Diana Williams?" My guard went up immediately. "Who's asking?" "My name is Patricia. I was at your father's funeral. I saw what happened that day." She gestured to a nearby bench. "Could we talk for a moment?" Every instinct told me to refuse, but something in her expression made me agree. I settled Daniel in the sandbox where I could watch him, then joined her on the bench. "I need to tell you something," Patricia said, her hands twisting in her lap. "About your father and Sarah. I knew them. I volunteered at the same community center, and I saw their relationship develop. I knew it was complicated, knew people would judge, but I also saw how much they loved each other." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "Because I've watched you this past year and a half. Seen you at the grocery store with Daniel. Seen you at the park. Seen you getting judged and whispered about, and I've seen you hold your head high anyway." She reached out and grasped my hand. "I wanted you to know that what you did that day, taking that baby, keeping your promise, it was the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed. Your father would be so proud of you." I felt tears prick my eyes. My father put me in an impossible situation. "He did," she agreed. "But you made it beautiful anyway. That little boy has a home because of you. Sarah died in peace because of you. You took a tragedy and turned it into love. That's not nothing." We talked for another hour while Daniel played, and she shared stories about my father and Sarah that filled in gaps I hadn't even known existed. Not excusing what he'd done, but humanizing it, making it less about betrayal and more about complicated people making complicated choices. When we parted ways, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You're doing an amazing job. Don't let anyone tell you different." I cried in my car for 20 minutes after, Daniel strapped in his car seat behind me, confused but patient. These moments of unexpected kindness and validation kept me going when everything else felt impossibly hard. Time moved forward the way it always does, indifferent to our pain and our healing alike. Daniel turned 2, then 3. He started preschool, made friends, became his own person separate from the dramatic circumstances of his arrival in my life. The questions started around age 4. Why don't I have a daddy? Where's my first mommy? Why do I look different than my cousins? I answered each question with age-appropriate honesty, planting seeds of understanding that would grow as he grew. Yes, his story was complicated. Yes, his family was different from other families. But different didn't mean wrong, and complicated didn't mean unloved. Marcus and James never reconciled with me or acknowledged Daniel as family. It hurt less as time passed, but it never stopped hurting entirely. I mourned the relationships we'd lost, even as I built new ones to replace them. But Vanessa became closer than ever, and Marcus Jr. stepped into an uncle role that surprised everyone. My grandson Tyler, who was only 2 years older than Daniel, became his best friend. The absurdity of a man being best friends with his nephew didn't escape anyone, but we learned to laugh about it. Robert remarried 2 years after our divorce, to a woman his own age who wanted to travel and enjoy retirement. I was happy for him, truly. He'd chosen what was right for him, just as I'd chosen what was right for me. We'd both lost something, but we'd both gained something too. On what would have been my father's 75th birthday, I took Daniel to the cemetery. He was 4 years old enough to understand that this was a special place, young enough not to fully grasp death's finality. "That's your daddy, Grandpa," I told him, pointing to the headstone that read, "Beloved Father and Friend." The irony of that inscription wasn't lost on me. Whoever had ordered it clearly hadn't known about the secret son. "Is he in heaven?" Daniel asked, the way children do. "I think so, baby. I hope so." "Does he know about me?" The question pierced my heart. "Yes. He knew about you and loved you before you were even born. He just didn't get enough time with you." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then placed his small hand on the gravestone. "Hi, Daddy, Grandpa. Mama says you loved me. I love you too." I broke down completely, sobbing in a cemetery while my 4-year-old son comforted me with pats on the back and, "It's okay, Mama," repeated like a mantra. The juxtaposition would have been funny if it weren't so devastatingly sad. Later that night, after Daniel was asleep, I pulled out the letter Sarah had given me that day at the funeral. I'd read it hundreds of times, but some nights I needed the reminder of why I'd made the choices I'd made. The paper was worn now, soft with handling, some of the ink starting to fade. But the words were still clear: "Please don't let him be alone." I hadn't. Despite losing my marriage, alienating my brothers, being judged by my community, and appending my entire life, I hadn't let him be alone. And I never would. 5 years had passed since that shocking funeral when a stranger placed a baby in my arms and changed my life forever. Daniel was now 8 years old, thriving in 3rd grade, playing soccer, and obsessed with dinosaurs. He knew his story, age-appropriately edited, but honest, and he was proud of his complicated family. I was 57, tired in ways I'd never been before, but also more content than I'd expected. My law practice had stabilized. My relationships had found their level. My life looked nothing like I'd planned, but it was mine, and it was good. One evening, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he looked up at me with those eyes, my father's eyes, Sarah's eyes, his own unique combination, and asked, "Mama, do you ever wish you hadn't taken me that day? That you'd said no?" My heart clenched. "Why would you ask that, baby?" "Tyler said his mommy said you gave up everything for me. Your husband and your brothers and your whole life. Did you? Did I ruin your life?" I pulled him close, breathing in the little boy's smell of him, shampoo and grass stains and innocence. "Listen to me very carefully. You didn't ruin my life. You changed it, yes. Made it harder in some ways, better in others. But Daniel, taking you home that day was the best decision I ever made. You understand me? But you lost your husband. I lost a marriage that couldn't handle hard choices. That's different. And baby, the people I lost weren't willing to love you. That's on them, not on you. You are not responsible for other people's choices." He thought about this seriously, the way he thought about everything. "I'm glad you took me," he finally said. "I'm glad you're my mama. I'm glad too, baby. So glad." As I left his room that night, I thought about the question he'd asked. Did I ever wish I hadn't taken him? The honest answer was more complicated than the one I'd given my 8-year-old son. There were moments, in the early days especially, when I'd wondered if I'd made a mistake. When I was exhausted and alone and mourning everything I'd lost. When my brothers walked past me at family functions like I was invisible. When Robert's absence ached like a physical wound. But those moments passed. And what remained was Daniel, funny, smart, kind Daniel, who existed because I'd said yes when every rational part of me wanted to say no. I didn't know what the future held. Daniel would grow up and learn the full truth of his origins eventually. He'd have questions I might not be able to answer. He might resent the choices his father made, the secrets his birth mother kept, the impossible situation I'd been placed in. But he'd also know, without any doubt, that he was wanted. Chosen. Loved fiercely by a woman who gave up everything to make sure he had a home. And maybe, in the end, that would be enough. I settled into my own bed that night, exhausted but peaceful, and thought about that moment at the funeral 5 years ago. The shock of a stranger placing a baby in my arms. The weight of that letter. The revelation that destroyed everything I thought I knew about my father and my family. That moment had been the worst day of my life and the beginning of the best decision I'd ever made. Both things were true simultaneously, and I'd learned to hold both truths without letting them tear me apart. My father had been a good man and a flawed man. He'd loved me and betrayed me. He'd created this impossible situation and, in doing so, had given me a gift I never knew I needed, a second chance at motherhood, at building something meaningful, at proving that love can be chosen as surely as it can be inherited. Sarah had been desperate and brave and terrified and strong. She'd trusted me with the most precious thing in her world, and I'd honored that trust every single day for 5 years. And Daniel was innocent and perfect and mine. Not because biology said so, but because love said so. Because on the worst day of my life, I'd made a choice that defined everything that came after. Write in the comments if you've ever had to make an impossible choice between what's easy and what's right. Subscribe to hear more stories about family, love, and the complicated truths that shape our lives. Because sometimes the most shocking revelation isn't the dramatic secret itself, it's discovering what you're capable of when life forces you to choose who you want to be.